everybody. Thank you for joining the Synthetic Intelligence Forum online. My name is Vic, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this panel discussion about the keys to developing a successful AI strategy. I'm happy to be joined today by my friends and industry colleagues from the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, the Quebec Institute for Learning Algorithms, and the Vector Institute, who are going to share their insights about this important topic. I'm going to start by asking our panelists to tell us a little bit about their role and what it is that they do that brings them into contact with the design and implementation of AI strategies. So I'd like to start by asking Mara, who joins us from the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, to tell us about their role as well as working with AI strategies on a daily basis.
Sure, thanks, Vic. Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Cairo. Great to be here. I'm product owner with Amii, so I'm currently leading out our apprentice program where we're matching kind of the leading talent with companies who are ready to dive into their AI projects. Typically, they don't necessarily have the in-house skills to be able to do that, so we match them with the talent that's coming out of our local universities, and they're able to kind of test out the waters. The talent works beneath our lead scientists, so it's kind of a mentorship position as well. And at the end, we have the ultimate hope that our clients will take on the talent full time. So we're really trying to develop that talent pipeline and get the right people in the right companies.
Thank you, Mara. Thanks for joining our feed. Jumana, same question for you.
Hi, I'm Jumana Agos, and I'm the director of the Applied Machine Learning Research Team at Mila. The mandate of my team is to work with industry on machine learning, deep learning, reinforcement learning projects. And there are two main goals. The first one is to introduce machine learning in a company or improve their existing machine learning stack. And second, which is an extremely important goal, is to make sure that throughout the collaboration, we ensure knowledge transfer, in the sense that if we're solving a machine learning problem, we want to make sure that the company can then continue the work without us. My team also organizes some teaching sessions about machine learning. So every year we do the Introduction to Deep Learning school. This is a joint collaboration with Ivado in Montreal. And our online school is starting this coming, well, tomorrow actually, Thursday. So this is what we do.
Thank you, Jumana. Welcome to the panel discussion. And Sedef, same question for you.
Hello, Vic, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you all. So I'm the Applied AI project manager at Vector Institute. I'm engaging with Vector sponsors, industry sponsors specifically, on Applied AI project. Currently, I'm leading several multi-industrial participant projects with our industrial partners. Same as Joanna, I'm working with our industry sponsors, and then we are looking at the commonalities, like common problems, and what are those industry partners' common problems, and then we can solve through different programs. We have like a professional development programs. We have a collaborative project that I'm leading. So we are focusing on mostly, again, like try to adapt, try to work with our sponsors, and then try to help them to adapt AI and machine learning and all these advanced technologies. And then the main issue here is that the knowledge transfer, as Jumana mentioned. So we are working on this very specifically knowledge transfer of AI and machine learning techniques to their strategies and their machine learning projects.
Thank you, Sedef, and welcome to the panel discussion as well. So I'm very impressed to learn that each of you is working closely with organizations in terms of their AI strategies, but coming at them from various different angles. So I'm really excited to hear how this conversation develops and different perspectives shed light on this important topic. Mara, my first question is to you, which is in your mind, working with the industry the way that you do through your organization, what factors in your mind are important, first of all, to ensure or to guarantee the success of an AI strategy?
Sure. So yeah, first and foremost, the AI strategy should align with your business goals and really help your business move towards those goals. So AI is a tool that's meant to be used to reach a business objective, and it's only successful if it helps your business move forward in the way that it wants to. It's also important to keep in mind that AI is research and development. So a lot of times success can look like failure, and that's okay, and that should be expected. The strategy, it should be realistic, and you should be able to achieve it in your company. So if the plan is too ambitious, you might have a hard time getting support and buy-in from across the organization.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that, Mara. Same question for you, Jumana. You mentioned you were working hands-on with applied AI technology, but you also have a research background yourself. So in your mind, kind of bridging those two worlds, what factors of an AI strategy ensure its possibility for success?
As Mara said, first, I think there needs to be some business objectives that AI can serve. Because some companies sometimes will want to do AI just because of the hype, but this is not a good reason for investing in AI. There needs to be an alignment in the company. So high management needs to be on board because integrating AI in a company is a complex process. It's a long-term process. There will be failure. We need to tolerate failure. And we need also to ensure a change in the company culture to make sure that AI can be introduced in it, because those are different ways of working. It's very important to have the right talent. The talent can be machine learning experts, data scientists, software engineers. You need to have a comprehensive data strategy, appropriate computational resources, for example, GPUs. It's also very important to shield the human resources working on AI projects so that they have time to concentrate on a project. This is not a software engineering project, it's a machine learning project where there is a lot of thinking that has to go in to make something work. The other thing is to make sure to understand that once we deploy a machine learning model in production, this is not like the last time that we trained this model. This is a continuous process. So you will need to have new data, improve the model performance, especially that the world out there is changing. So the distribution of the data might change as well. So those are the main factors, and there are many other factors that one can consider also.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jumana. And Sedef, the same question for you.
I'm in me. Yes. So reiterating what Mara and Jumana said, so it is crucial to have a good understanding of the goal of the AI strategy by the companies. So the success cannot be centered on the technology itself, but has to be driven by values. So at the company level, this value is a business values. At a national and country level, so it is more on well-being of its citizens. So, you know, we have like companies have AI strategies, and nationals and countries have also AI strategies. So I think success looks like a leadership team aligned with the needs of their AI team. So a winning plan, let's say, establish a clear direction that keeps AI teams focused on outcomes that create a significant impact on the company's mission. Of course, strategy alone won't realize all the benefits of AI. That will also require adequate investment, a level of readiness, managerial commitment, and a lot of planning and very hard work. So, but an effective AI strategy creates a foundation that promotes success.
Thank you, Sedef. That's some great points. So I know each of you talked about sort of the characteristics or the attributes of successful AI strategies, but I also heard each of you actually contextualize AI success within the frame of business success or organizational success. So I'd like to start with you, Jumana, and in terms of your background with applied AI, you talked about the characteristics. Now, what does success actually look like? When do you know that this AI project or strategy is on the right track versus it needs a course correction? What does success look like?
It can be evaluated at several levels. First, as long as there is synergy in a company and buy-in from all the stakeholders for an AI strategy, then we're on the right track for success. If people are pulling in all different directions, then this strategy is failing. The other thing is the success can be represented by products that are making a difference for the company, for the users of those products, and that are solving real problems. Success is also in trying to have a strategy where we think about ML solutions, machine learning solutions that can be reusable in a company. So you can have the same kind of solution be applied to build different type of products, and you don't want to duplicate this work. So it's having a buy-in for the strategy, having efficient processes, having products that make a difference for the company and the users of the products. And also success is when I see a company that is open to innovation and to allowing its employees to consider new ideas, either to improve existing products or to propose new ones.
You're on mute, Vic.
You're on mute, Vic.
Yes, thank you. Has to happen once per discussion. But thank you, Jumana. It's really nicely tied that to the bigger innovation prerogative or the bigger innovation priority. That's interesting too. Mara, same question for you in working with the clients that you work with and where the talent is actually placed. What does actually success look like?
Yeah, definitely reiterating Jumana's point there about organizational buy-in. So you need to be able to explain why this is important and why everyone should care in the organization. Oftentimes it's actually the C-suite is the biggest barrier and needs the most in terms of education and understanding of value. So if you don't have their support, it's not going to be a successful strategy. Also, having participation from across the organization and including everyone that will be impacted or will have impact on the AI system. Not everyone at the table needs to be a data scientist. You should include your domain experts as well as the AI experts. And if you don't have those in-house AI experts, reaching out to organizations like the ones on the call today can help inform on that piece. Also, revisiting the strategy often, building it into the organizational communication. Maybe you post the strategy somewhere for people to be exposed to it and understand kind of why they're doing what they're doing.
Thank you, Mara. That's great. And Sedef, on your side, I know you mentioned with your background, you've have a track record of delivering successful AI projects and portfolios of projects. So how are there certain internal ways that you look at the work that you do and say, okay, this is what success looks like, and how is that compatible with and consistent with the clients for whom you are delivering the projects? Are they generally the same in terms of how they look at success, or what does really success look like in your projects?
Yeah, it's a good point. Thanks, Vic. So in my past projects, so I've been working with most of our sponsors already. And then, of course, their success metrics are different. So, but one and the common theme is that they are looking for what this project brings the value to their business. So what can we do with this? At the end of the day, they're taking this knowledge, but they need to use that knowledge on their own project. So how they turn this knowledge into in practice and all this business units, what can they do with this? So this is important for them. So as Mara and Johanna mentioned earlier, so they can process people and actual value. So what this brings to the table, and then all this C-suite and all the managerial units are very keen to use this kind of technologies or this project output, but they need to predefine, okay, so when we have this outcome, so how this create a value in which way? So this is, I think, important that they need to start with.
That's great. Thank you for that, Sedef. So, Mara, I'd like to start the next question with you. And this has to do with a very important topic nowadays, which has to do with the ethical AI, responsible AI, or socially conscious AI, AI for good. We hear about this quite often. So in your mind, can ethical and responsible considerations be incorporated within an AI strategy? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. First, you need to make sure that you're accounting for policies around bias. And you should be thinking about this from the beginning. You should inject it into the entire process, the entire AI strategy. It shouldn't just be like a checkbox at the end of something. Including people that might see things through a different lens too. Diversity of thought is really important when we are looking for this unconscious bias that AI can have. Bringing someone external to the project, to the conversation, having them look at the data, having that outside perspective can be really, really valuable, especially when you're looking for these unconscious biases. And just always make sure to keep people and the impact of the systems in mind. So you should be constantly asking, how might the system harm its users or its subjects once it's deployed?
Thank you, Mara. I'd like to come to you, Jumana, and ask this question. You know, you have a very deep research background in this field, and we know nowadays there's quite a few breakthroughs reported, even from a research perspective, science perspective, in terms of algorithmic fairness and debiasing algorithms and data sets and whatnot. So there are techniques out there. How do you see them being infused meaningfully within an AI strategy?
So first, some of those techniques can be used to try to explain the predictions made by a model. So for example, if you're deploying a model that is deciding whether to give someone a mortgage or not, if the decision is no, I'm not going to give this person a mortgage, we need to understand why. Now, the techniques to be able to have explainable predictions are not still where they need to be. So there is still work done in fundamental research to be able to explain the predictions of a model. The other thing is, as a machine learning researcher, every one of us needs to be aware of the bias that can exist in the data. It's not always easy to identify it. So we need to ask questions. If we're building a medical model, what are the characteristics of the population that is represented in this data? If then this model is deployed to the general public, will it behave properly or not? The other thing is to make sure that we are aware and understand the limitation of the state of the art in machine learning. For example, I've had people come to me and ask us to build chatbot systems for mental health systems. And I feel totally uncomfortable doing that, knowing that chatbot systems in deep learning are not developed well enough. So I wouldn't feel comfortable to have someone who's having problems and talking to a machine who will probably not understand what those persons are asking about. The other thing that is important when we talk about ethics is that we don't forget about the user. So we need to protect the data. So data privacy is important. We need to protect the data on the servers of the company. We need to inform the users what we're going to use their data for and whether we're going to sell it to someone or not, allowing the users to be able to delete their data if they want to. And the other thing, sometimes companies have to make a decision about whether they want to build certain types of products. For example, I know companies that wouldn't want to build products that can be used by the military, for example, in wars, because they don't feel that this is something that is in line with their own values. So there is a wide range of items to look at when deciding about ethics and responsible considerations.
Thank you, Jumana. That's a very insightful answer. And Sedef, the same question for you, because we think about, as Jumana mentioned, that there are a lot of tools and techniques out there, but at the same time, in certain areas, there is still much fundamental work to be done. And Sedef, you're successfully delivering projects for clients. So how do you, when you're working with your clients on projects, how are these topics kind of addressed? And if a client wants this and you want to bring it to them, how do you infuse ethical and responsible AI considerations into their strategies?
Yeah, that's a great point. So, I mean, like, as we talked already in the AI strategy, the organizations should have clear ethical and governance frameworks. So we are, talking with all our sponsors, and then we are discussing within the thought leadership project as well. So that how can we create a privacy, ethics, and governance frameworks, and then infuse those frameworks into the AI strategy. I think this is important. And then the companies also need to consult best practices guidelines, such as the partnerships on AI, ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, or the principles of AI recently published with the OECD. So it is important that the companies set up collaboration with the ethical or legal domain. So we also work with our sponsors, so they need to collaborate with their ethical committees. If they don't have this kind of like ethical committees, that we address them, propose them to, maybe they can create this kind of committees inside the organizations, and they also need to work with their legal domain experts. So it is also essential to ensure that the AI is unbiased and isn't making decisions no one can understand. So, but it's creating unbiased and fair AI is a definite challenge. So the recent technologies and capabilities such as like fairness indicators and explainable AI tools will not only speed up the secure and AI journey, it will also enable the organization to stay compliant with the current regulations and to react quickly when they change. So this is also important to have this kind of tools and techniques in mind, and then they can also help the companies mitigate risk and biases.
Thank you, Sedef. Very interesting answer. And I really like how you talked about it from a journey perspective. So I want to get to the next question, Sedef, and I'd like to stay with you for the moment for this question, which has to do with, we can look at pitfalls or kind of traps to be avoided in two ways. One of them is certainly don't do the things which are the good things to, make sure you don't do the inverse of whatever is the good to do, which we kind of talked about. What does that look like? But then also there are some things which are not that, right? There are some things which you just shouldn't do. As I, for example, remember with Jumana made an interesting point that there are technologies out there which could be used for good, but which could be used in a sort of setting where the values of the person who's making that technology conflict or collide. So my question to you is, Sedef, in your experience with delivering strategies and projects to clients, what are the common pitfalls that you would advise folks, or trip mines, or just kind of issues to avoid in designing an AI strategy?
Yeah, definitely. So it is very, great point to when we're focusing on the success of those strategies, we also need to consider what are the pitfalls, what are the points that we need to consider. So one thing that come to my mind is like focusing on the benefits of AI and not taking into account of its limitations. So we are all focusing on the success of this technology, this advancement, but what are those limitations? So what AI can do to your business and what can't do to your business. So those are important points that we need to consider. So companies need to educate themselves. Again, what are the limitations? Another point is that seeing AI is an innovation that shouldn't be adopted for its own sake. So adopting AI isn't easy. It's like a very hard work and lots of steps and all the considerations with the companies, but it demands a different mindset. And sometimes it's hard to know when you're doing right things. So without focus, it's easy to spend every day with experimenting all the time. So, but ultimately not taking the organization forward. So this is another thing that we need to consider. Another one is that excluding data stakeholders. So scientists and similar roles are frequently left out when the companies building their AI studies and AI strategy conversations. So whether intentional or unintentionally, this exclusion can cause trouble down the road. So leading to issues with data quality and integration. So business owners and companies can have a vision, but without the data to support that, any machine learning project will be start for input. So having your data scientists and data analysts and administrators present in the data strategy conversation, it's important.
Thank you, Sedef. Great comments. Just an excellent collection of points there. Mara, same question for you is, what are some of the common pitfalls that should be avoided when designing an AI strategy?
Sure. So if your plan is too rigid and you're not allowing yourself to be agile, you can definitely set yourself up for failure. So this is going to be an iterative process. If you know that going in, you can build the strategy to allow the time and space to iterate on that. Also, there may be problems if your plan is too ambitious. So at Amii, we really recommend to start with the smaller, low risk, high value projects, or the low hanging fruit. And this will help you kind of get that organizational buy-in, and you can start to point to your wins to take on the larger projects down the road. I think this was already mentioned, but definitely you don't need to start with the flashiest technology just because everyone else is kind of throwing around the buzzwords. Start with something that makes sense for your business. Also, there's lots of pitfalls here. So you might have problems if you overlook the importance of your data and the amount of effort required kind of upfront to make sure that the data is in a format that you can use in artificial intelligence. Also, be really careful with your assumptions and make sure that you're challenging them. So maybe you think your data is good, but is it? Have you really considered bias? Bring people to the table that are able to challenge you on your assumptions too. It's great to be excited to start your first AI project, but you don't necessarily, you don't want to, you want to set yourself up for success essentially. And lastly, you don't even really need an AI strategy if there's no direct impact on your business. So you're not getting left behind if it's not the direction that your business wants to go in, just because other companies are doing it. Only do it if it makes sense for you.
Thank you, Mara. And Jumana, I'll ask you the same question because I know you mentioned previously that certainly we want to not treat AI initiatives like software development projects. At the same time, you also had indicated that really having that human factor concerns be incorporated into the AI process. So those are some great things to do, and we certainly want to avoid not doing them. But are there certain other types of pitfalls and challenges, Jumana, you would advise folks to be careful about?
Yeah, so as mentioned, data is extremely important, and this is one of the biggest pitfalls we see where companies haven't thought through their data pipeline. So the data is either not available or available through like a very heavy, difficult process. It's not clean. I've seen a lot of companies brag about cutting their budget in terms of data annotation, and they don't realize that they will pay a very heavy price later on. So the entire data pipeline is extremely important. Understanding what state-of-the-art in machine learning can deliver and cannot deliver. Machine learning has limitations. It's an evolving science. So you shouldn't just start implementing a new idea just because it came out and it's sexy and everyone is talking about it. Will this idea make a difference in the pipeline that you're building? Sometimes you will have to test it. Sometimes you already have a feel of whether it will help or not. Understanding also that the world around us evolves. So you can build a machine learning model, deploy it using the data that you have, but it might be that your competition is offering functionality that comes on top of what you're building, and your own users will start asking your products about your machine learning model about this functionality, and the model might extrapolate and predict the wrong thing. So the distribution of the data is evolving with time, and this is something to keep in mind and to adapt to it and to be able to deliver good results when this happens. The other thing that I sometimes see is that some people in companies doing machine learning think that this is a push button, and it really is not. This is not a software engineering project. There is no magical recipe where I can take a machine learning model and make it work on all kinds of different problems. Every problem is like a new problem, and we need to stop, think about it, figure out how to properly solve it, and what kind of machine learning solution is appropriate for it.
Thank you, Jumana. Very interesting comments there. So for my next question, it has to do with frameworks. I know everybody today has talked about the importance of aligning AI strategy with organizational strategy. Yet one question that then certainly comes up is, in an intuitive sense, we can certainly say that, okay, you know, we're doing these things in our AI strategy because generally speaking, this is what we are doing from an organizational strategy perspective. But in terms of frameworks, to systematically and in a structured way align our AI strategy with an organizational strategy, Jumana, I'd like to start with you. There's quite a few frameworks out there. A number of consultancies have published frameworks. Is there a particular framework that you refer to, or maybe even if it's conceptual or whether it's published? How do you actually assess that fit and alignment between an AI strategy and an organization strategy?
Well, the first question is the AI strategy here to serve the company and the organization or not? We go back to the question of, are we doing that just for the hype, or are we doing that to solve problems and to create opportunities in the company? If the answer is no, then this AI strategy is not aligned. Once we consider that the AI strategy will serve some useful goals, then we go back to the need to have complete buy-in from everyone, and then putting in place, defining the opportunities where AI can help, and putting in place the processes that can help us do all the necessary changes to get there. So this is cultural change, having diverse team that have different skill sets, having all the appropriate guidelines and policies to govern data, and having the teams that can focus on the opportunities where ML can help, and giving them the space to get there. When we try to work in isolation, any strategy that is leading to groups working in isolation usually fails. Now, I've seen other companies who, instead of wanting to start big with a big AI strategy that is aligned with the organizational goals, sometimes will start smaller. They will say, I don't want to disrupt the process of the company. Can I identify a particular problem where machine learning can help and build a small proof of concept, show that this is working, so that we understand how the company needs to change to be able to move towards AI. And this can also sometimes work, especially in smaller companies.
Thank you, thank you, Jumana. That's great. So Sedef, I'd like to ask you the same question as in terms of frameworks, what's your perspective on it? And especially in your case, it's very interesting because you're working with different clients, and the clients themselves may have certain frameworks that they wish to use to value AI solutions or align them with their organization strategy. So is there one that you normally prescribe and refer to, or are you comfortable using multiple of them depending on the priorities of the clients?
Yeah, so I don't usually, I've seen several of the frameworks, and then I don't have a favor of the particular framework. So I think that whether the company is improving their current business or building out a new business, AI strategy should serve their business plan, not the other way around. So I think this is the more important that they need to understand when they're trying to set up their strategy, whether using the other frameworks or whether they're going to develop their own framework. So I think the useful ones that start with the consideration of their business plan and then include all the business units, and ethical consideration is one of the top priorities and should be in top priorities in that framework. And I see some frameworks, again, like start with the business strategies, and then it also goes into the data strategy. So data strategy should be created by the companies. So then the data is the main component of all the models and everything. So they have to have a really good and competitive data strategies within the companies. And then goes into technology, and then how to build this models, and then what are the infrastructure that they need to deploy these kind of advanced AI technologies within the company. So this is also important to keep in mind, that they need to have the technology strategy within their AI strategies. And then goes to the people. So, training the technical people as well as the business people. So this is also important, that the training the company as a whole, not only focusing on the technical people itself. So because the AI, creating the AI literacy companies and AI literacy is very valuable for the companies, and sustaining it, first building their AI strategies and then sustaining their AI strategies, and then the last piece would be the importance of the governance. So the governance for AI strategy refers to the policies and processes and relevant technology components required to ensure you have a safe, reliable, accountable, and trustworthy AI solutions. To deliver those solutions that have all four of these qualities, as well as the high-performing the technologies around it. And then they need to connect practices for the design of AI solutions to the design of policies and process and controls, and supporting the technologies. Like, for example, ensuring the algorithm decision can be traced back to the data and models that produce them is important for, like, say, debugging or compliance or continuous improvement. So those are the steps that I usually, suggest to the partners.
Very, very interesting, Sedef. Thank you for that, because it seems that it's actually not one framework, as you said, but multiple levels and multiple frameworks at each level that you actually select, which is ideal for a given situation. Mara, I'd like to ask you the same question. Is in your role, is there a go-to framework that you refer to, or do you also have an ensemble of frameworks that you rely upon to make your decisions?
Sure. So with Amii, we actually have an AI adoption spectrum, and this helps us evaluate our industry partners when we start working with them. So this is kind of the framework we use most of the time, and it's really helped me understand organizations when they come to us. So essentially it's 5 stages, and then we place the organization at whichever stage makes the most sense for them. So the 5 stages are exploring, initiating, implementing, operationalizing, and advancing. And then at each of those stages, there's 4 pillars. So the pillars, which were kind of talked about before, are data, people, strategy, and technology. And those 4 pillars kind of define where you are on the spectrum. I really, really like this, what Amii's developed here, because it's easy to understand, and it allows for the organization, for different parts of the organization, to sit at different parts of the spectrum. It's also a really great visual. I don't have it here today with me, but it can show you how far you've come and kind of your opportunities for growth in the future. We also have a machine learning process lifecycle, or MLPL, what we call. and it's more of an operational framework. So this is what our scientists use to kind of capture that iterative process when you are actually doing the hands-on work and working on your machine learning problems. The machine learning process lifecycle shows you kind of all the considerations that need to be taken into account every time you iterate on the problem and the solution.
Jumana, I'd just like to ask you the last question then we have, and then we can also have other questions coming from the chat. But the next question has to do with just the changing and how quickly and rapidly the field of AI is evolving. Every day we look at the news and there's some new breakthrough being reported and some new advanced solution being invented. But sometimes it feels like information overload. It seems a bit like it's saturated and there's just way too many pieces of information coming at us when it relates to AI. Is there a particular source? Would you advise folks to refer to a particular channel or your newspaper or something like that where you refer to? And even on the research side, what kind of advice would you give to folks in terms of just absorbing all of the information that's coming at us so fast?
Yeah, I read a bit like the big stories, but I'm careful about how to interpret the contents because sometimes there is bragging, but you don't necessarily have something to back it. At Mila, like in my team and with the companies we work, we try to make sure to focus on the scientific papers that are coming out. So those can be found on arXiv. Now, the problem on arXiv is you have an overload of a lot of papers that come out every day. And not all of them have been vetted, but because not all of them have been already submitted to conferences or journals. So there you have to decide. At some point you start knowing which groups are doing interesting work, but it's not. We shouldn't only focus on reading papers from those groups because there might be new ideas coming out of other teams who are starting to innovate in a particular field. So in general, what we try to do is look at the papers, quickly skim the papers, identify the ones which are relevant to read, and then focus on those. The other thing we do in my team is because we're working on very diverse machine learning projects, we've made sure that different people in the team are specialized in different areas of machine learning so that collectively we can be experts in several fields, because individually it's impossible for one person to be expert in all of machine learning. The field has become just too big. What is also important is to attend conferences because there you will see a lot of new ideas coming out. You'll have the opportunity to discuss those ideas with other people, and this is extremely important. And within a company, to have actually paper reviews, discussions about what's happening in the scientific community, to be able to identify what might be relevant for the company. And another thing that is important in the company is to have an innovation team that is a bit shielded from the product, because if the people who are delivering products to customers are also the people who are supposed to stay up to date with the fast-moving AI field, this becomes impossible. So you need to have a team who is shielded, who can read papers, test new ideas, and then propose them to the teams who are deploying products to customers.
Thank you, Jumana. And Sedef, the same question for you is, what kind of sources do you refer to? And also, is there a particular strategy, the way that Jumana described, that you find works really well?
Yes, as Joanna mentioned, so we use the same strategies. So we use arXiv papers. I mean, we look at all those papers, but they're constantly coming, so it's no way that we can keep it up the latest and greatest papers. So what we do is, in my team, like again, we skim through some of the important ones, and then we also have researchers at Vector, so we constantly connecting with them, and then we ask their suggestions and their recommendations, and then we look at those papers and then see which one is relevant to our use cases or our projects. So then we can try to implement some of the findings of that paper, and then we can give those papers to our sponsors, and then they can read if that makes sense, and if they can see the potential that the outcome of that paper or that idea, so they can use in the project. So that would helpful for them. And then another way that we do is we have technical sessions at Vector. So in our industry innovation team, so we organize endless summer school sessions. So it's like a half-day seminar series, and then we pick the theme, say, for example, like optimization or data set shift, or like a computer vision or NLP and state of the art in NLP, or question and answering system, and so on and so forth. And then we bring the our researchers to give them a talk to our sponsors, technical folks, and then they can understand what is going on at Vector or beyond the Vector. So what is the latest and advanced technologies in that field, so then they can digest those information, and then maybe they can apply it into their project or our project that they can collaborate with. Another one, as Giovanna also mentioned, that the joining or attending the conferences. So those are also important sources that we as a team or beyond the team, so we constantly attend the conferences and then see what's going on there, and then what are the latest ideas that our researchers are working on, even the industry sessions, because some of the conferences have the industry sessions. So there are also helpful and very useful resources to, attend and see what has been done so far.
Thank you, Sedef. And I'd like to ask the same question to you, Mara, in terms of reliable sources of information and also some tried and tested best practice approaches for how to kind of synthesize insights from this deluge of information that comes at us regularly.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So for like your AI strategy, it's important to revisit it often and make sure that it is tracking towards your business objective. So at Amii, that's something that we're constantly doing. And like we've all kind of discussed, there are plenty of companies out there that are making it their business to help you stay up to date. Amii, for instance, we run monthly meetups. We talk about industry and research topics. It's always like a really nice mix of what's happening with our fellows at the U of A and what's going on in industry. So there's really no shortage of learning opportunities, as we've discussed, especially with our virtual world now. So what we recommend is just signing up to a mailing list or two, something that interests you, something that's going to align with your business goals, and going from there. Just kind of dipping your toes in and seeing what feels right to you. Also looking at best practices. So looking at what other companies are doing, like the ones that we're discussing here. I don't recommend you always have to stay within your field even to look at best practices. Some of the most insight I've had is when I've attended a session that really had nothing to do with my day-to-day work, but ultimately there was this unique perspective that truly did align with what I did. And I probably wouldn't have gained that perspective if I didn't go outside of my comfort area. So oftentimes we're, facing similar challenges in very different fields.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mara. So one question that has come up when I have done these panel discussions previously has to do with two parts to this. One is talent. So for sure, and some of you touched today about different sources of talent and how your organizations can help other organizations have access to highly trained, highly skilled talent. But the other part of it also are the tools. So we all hear about this notion of democratizing data science and auto machine learning, and you have these tools which are very graphical and point and click kind of tools. So where do you kind of see those fitting into an organization's AI strategy? There's certainly a connection between the notion of talent and tooling, but at the same time, I'd like to start with you, Sedef. Do you see organizations kind of having similar kinds of preferences in terms of where they recruit from and what kind of tools they use, or is it very much specific to an organization on a project by project basis? How do you kind of see this in the landscape, Sedef?
Yeah, this is like we discussed earlier, like a talent and the tool is really important for the company's AI strategies. And then the talent, of course, like they are the ones who are going to work within the companies and then, deliver the success of this kind of AI projects. And then they need to find a right talent. And then if not, then they need to also educate their talent, so educate their employees, their technical as well as the business employees. So this is also important. So one thing that we do at Vector is that we have professional development courses and programs. So what we do is we work with our sponsored companies, and then we give them a technical or non-technical educational courses, and then they can take this learning and then they can use those either the technical or non-technical knowledge in their companies. Another one that we recently started is a talent hub. So at Vector, we have this talent hub program. So then our companies, they might have a job openings or internship openings that they can, post this kind of job opportunities into the talent hub, and then they can match with our students and researchers or recently graduates or other different researchers or recently graduate that they are looking for a job. So we have those kind of tools. In terms of the tools that the talent can use within the company, so there are like open source tools that most companies are, sometimes they use, sometimes they're not. So sometimes they are looking to use their own tools or develop their own tools within the companies, or sometimes they use like open source, which is really like open source community is advancing very well. So they're mixed in between like open source or the company owned tools, I would say.
Thank you, Sedef. That's very interesting to know. And Jumana, same question for you on talent and tooling.
Yeah, so the demand for talent is extremely high and talent is scarce, so especially that big companies like the GAFAM are hiring a lot of the talent coming out of the universities and research institutes. At Mila, we have developed a professional master's in machine learning program with the University of Montreal. And the goal of this program is to create machine learning talent that can go work in industry. So students come from diverse backgrounds and they will do, I think it's 6 courses of machine learning. And they have to do also a 6 month of internship in a company. And we try to match students with companies that have the same kind of interests as the students. And in general, what happens is at the end of the process, the company ends up hiring the students. So this has been a program that has been working quite well. We also have the Introduction to Deep Learning School that we teach every year just to sensitize the companies to what deep learning is. There is obviously, one will not come out as being an expert after attending a school, but this is just so that companies understand what's out there. The other thing that is important is, given the scarcity of the machine learning talent, is for companies to build also this talent inside their walls. They can allow their employees to take courses about machine learning. Now, taking a course is not sufficient. Practice is extremely important. When you start doing machine learning, you have to build your intuition. And this only comes when you start doing actual projects. So companies have to give people, like their employees, enough time to do that. In terms of tools, like what I see today is most companies have switched to the open source code. There are many libraries that exist out there now, and they make it very easy to start doing machine learning projects. Like a few years ago, if you wanted to do a machine learning project, you would have to code everything from scratch. It would take months, and then deploying it in production would be even harder because you have to optimize the code for all kinds of constraints. And today with the open source libraries, you already have models that are already built, like the framework exists. You can train those models, adapt them to what you need, and then it's easy to deploy them. And most companies have switched to that.
Thank you, Jumana. And I'd like to ask Mara the same question.
Sure, yeah. So definitely reiterating what the other 2 panelists have said. In terms of talent, it is scarce. What we're trying to do at Amii is really, we have the talent pool. We know the students that are studying under our fellows at the U of A, but we know that they're looking for jobs, usually outside of Alberta, definitely Edmonton. So what we want to do is approach them with the job opportunities, potentially even before they've had a chance to look themselves. So with our talent pipeline, we know the specializations of the students, and we know when a company comes to us and says, hey, we need some hands-on resources here, we can match them with the correct talent before they even have the opportunity to look for jobs elsewhere. In terms of tools, like the others said, I think open source is definitely, it makes a lot of sense now. I think our industry partners that come to us, they're looking for guidance on that. So we'll do whatever makes the most sense for their business, but there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So yeah, just whatever makes sense, finding the right fit for the company.
So thank you very much for that, Mara. And that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I'd like to thank Sedef and Jumana and Mara, each of you, for sharing your deep insights. I was very impressed by how, even though you have very different backgrounds and you work for different organizations, but how complementary and synergistic your views are and how much there's reinforcement in the insights that you share. And we'd love to have you back in the Synthetic Intelligence Forum in a couple of months to give us an updated view of the landscape, if you will, because this landscape is changing so fast. But I would like to thank you sincerely and for taking your lunch hour with us at the Synthetic Intelligence Forum today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, pleasure. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.